Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Bite Size Podcast. I'm your host Clayton at ClaytesAFC on Twitter. We're riding the high of the North London Derby victory still. I will still be running on that one. But we're taking to the continent now. The Champions League is underway. We're obviously recording this on Wednesday afternoon, so the second night of fixtures haven't got underway yet, but Liverpool and Aston Villa from England both got off to winning starts in Europe. And to preview the Atalanta game, got a very special guest. We've got Angus McFell with me today. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing well. Looking forward to talking about this, and as you say, very much riding the high of the weekend.
So am I. Yeah, how was Sunday for you?
It was a strange one because I think it was the first time in probably about 3 years that I'd actually entertained the prospect of losing the game.
Interesting.
Just because of the sort of midfield issues and everything, and a little bit of an unknown on how the team was actually going to set up and everything. I think that just fed into it. As the game went along, I wasn't necessarily concerned about losing, but it was sort of like, okay, will we actually do enough to win? Obviously got the goal, and I think after that was arguably the most comfortable period of the game, bizarrely. And yeah, so obviously, particularly with it being the 2:00 game, you've actually got the rest of the afternoon to sort of be buzzing off the back of it as well.
Yeah, literally just watch all of the interviews, all of the content, soak it all in. Yeah, it was a very fun day. But yeah, obviously attention turns to Atalanta tomorrow. It's so annoying. It obviously went down to 0 credits. I don't know if you saw this. So could have, should have gone, but I'm a student this year, so money's an issue. So
Yeah.
I swerved it. But I'm excited to talk about this one because I think Atalanta are a team that I don't think many of us will know about, despite them obviously winning the Europa League last year. They appeared in the Super Cup as a result, but they've really kind of leapt onto the scene in the last few years, I think, in tactical circles. Like, there's a lot of people I follow that are like nerds of the tactical side of football, as am I, that I always see blogs about. But the context behind why you're on here is I was obviously looking for fans of clubs of some of the teams that we're playing that I'm not so familiar about, and I've obviously known you for a long time, and I don't know how it escaped me, but a lot of the Planet FPL patrons were saying, "Why don't you just get Angus on?" Why are you such an encyclopedia of European football, and why do you know about teams like Atalanta?
It's a good question. Probably spent too much time just on football in general. But no, I think when I was a kid, it was one of the things you could get sort of early in the morning. I think it might have been on a Monday, but the Italian football highlights, which gets into a whole other conversation about free to air access to football and everything. But um, grew up sort of living in multiple different places, which I think sort of just opened my eyes to more stuff around Europe, well, around the world less so, more so around Europe. But it's probably about 14 when my parents moved to Italy for a few years. So I was sort of at school here, but spending all my school holidays there, going to watch all sort of in that case, it was all the Roma games I could. And it sort of stuck with me after that. And sort of branching out, just wanting to know more. It's that sort of almost thirst for knowledge. Throughout sort of school, university, studied sort of Spanish as well. So that sort of fed into, if you're doing that, might as well sort of learn more about Spanish football, the important things. And yeah, so those are probably the main two for me. And then just sort of wanting to know more has led to a little bit more about European football, but it probably it does sort of lean Italy and Spain for those reasons.
That's awesome. All right, so we've already penciled in our guest for the Girona preview. Thanks for that. But yeah, that's really cool. And living in Italy, being able to go watch Roma. What were Atalanta like as a football club when you were in that period watching them? And how would you kind of describe their journey compared to where they are now?
Yeah, I don't sort of remember too much of Atalanta featuring. Like I know they were sort of around, but I think it was around that time you had a few sort of different clubs sort of coming to prominence, and Atalanta was sort of there. But it was around the time of sort of the growth of Palermo, for example, and so they don't sort of feature as much in my memory from that sort of time. You had sort of the other big clubs, obviously, but the secondary clubs were clubs like Palermo. So um, it's a bit of a sort of blank spot for me in terms of what Atalanta were up to at that point. But obviously, sort of the growth into this period, particularly under Gasperini, has been sort of, I guess, the real sort of headline for them. Probably the biggest period in their history. I feel relatively comfortable saying.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I don't. I wouldn't say I feel comfortable in my knowledge around Atalanta, but this morning on Planet FPL, we did a little segment on them. So kind of went and read all of the Wikipedia pages and stuff. And the vibe I got was like they historically were a bit of a yo-yo club. And then Gasperini came in 2016. And it's interesting in terms of like the tactical side of things. I'm hoping you'll tell me a little bit more about them later on. But they're described in a lot of blogs I read as like organized chaos and very high energy, very aggressive. And in one of the interviews I read about Gasperini, he cites Marcelo Bielsa as one of his kind of inspirations. So everyone remembers that Leeds team under Bielsa. And if you kind of draw parallels there, I think it's interesting. But in terms of this period under him, yeah, it was like I said before he came in, it was perceived they were a bit of a yo-yo club. I think he's established them as more or less like a top 4 Serie A team. They had one year where they finished 8th, I believe, but other than that, consistently top 4. A couple of Coppa Italia runners-up in there. They've obviously won the Europa League, but I think for me, the one bit of kind of mainstream content that really propelled them was that James Horncastle interview when they played at Liverpool. I don't know if you remember that one, but he did a really good it wasn't an interview, it was like kind of punditry, but that was the one where I think they really became a bit more mainstream.
Yeah. The sort of he did a very good sort of explainer, I think, around the context around them, because it was this whole sort of like, not quite this has come out of nowhere, but this is a club that have been taken to a new level in this period. And I think just having that explained to people, I think did sort of, like you say, make it sort of much more widely known, a bit more about the story and that sort of thing, which, is always good. Like when people can learn more about a variety of clubs, I think that's always positive.
100%. I think this is why I was glad to get you on, because like when we do these match previews, it's always just the on the pitch stuff. It's like, okay, and we'll do it today. Like we'll go for our predicted 11 for Arsenal. Hoping you can tell me a little bit about Atalanta's season so far, what you think we can expect tomorrow tactically. And we'll do the score predictions. But I think it's really cool, like you said, like you say with yourself, you've got that thirst for kind of knowledge and learning, and I'm the same. Like I found it quite cool researching about them. But yeah, let's go into the actual game then. So the starting 11. So team news. Calafiori was the only person that was pictured back in training out of those people that were missing. So still no Zinchenko, Marino, Tomiyasu. God knows what's happened to him. Odegaard, obviously. But Declan Rice is back, as it was only a one-match domestic suspension. So the starting 11 against Spurs was obviously Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Timber. It was Jorginho and Partey, and then a front 4 of Martinelli, Saka, Trossard, and Havertz. And with this, when you're giving your predicted 11, feel free to, if you want to talk about Atalanta, I don't know if it's up to you. Do you want to give your predicted Arsenal 11 now? Do you want to tell us a little bit about Atalanta's season so far and what you think they may do? Happy to be led by you on this one.
I think we can start off with Arsenal. I think it's interesting because you also have to factor in, I guess, the sort of the Manchester City on Sunday of it all, in terms of how many players are still going to be put out there. Like I was sort of expecting Timber to play again, and I'm not saying all of a sudden I don't think he'll play.
Do you mean tomorrow or on Sunday?
Tomorrow. I was expecting him to play again tomorrow. Calafiori being back, I think, complicates that slightly in a positive sense, but just in terms of like with Timber, like will they view Sunday as the more important game to use him, sort of thing. So I think there's a decent chance now that we could see Calafiori start over him. I'm expecting Rice to come in. But how exactly that works, like it's obvious to say, oh yeah, he comes in for Jorginho. I don't know if you sort of think there's anything different that they might do, or whether it would just be a straight swap if that's the case.
taking the point you just made about City, I can actually see, excuse me, Partey getting rest against Atalanta, and that's not to say Atalanta's a team where you can afford to rotate 3, 4 players. I think it will be a tough game, but just thinking about Partey, he's played every game so far this season. He, I think, played twice for Ghana in the international break. He obviously played 90 against Tottenham on Sunday, and I just think reverse engineering from City, Arteta will want Rice with Partey in that midfield. So I can see Rice coming in for Partey in this game, and Jorginho, having not played anything so far this season until Sunday, getting another game against Atalanta, personally.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think Jorginho looked like he was cramping up a little bit towards the end of the Tottenham game. I know a lot of the accusations were pure gamesmanship, but I think there were a couple there who were struggling a bit. And I think whether they sort of view it as an opportunity, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if Arteta had some sort of plan to play Jorginho against City or whatever. But because I think with the graphic about before the Tottenham game about how many of his last 10 games were against top 7 teams or whatever, it was ridiculous. He basically only played like big games. But yeah, I think it would make sense in that case to sort of try and rest a couple. Like you say, it's just practical really with the sort of sequencing of games.
Yeah, that's the thing as well on the like who plays against City, because that's a really good point about Jorginho and his typical appearances coming in the bigger games. And this is definitely a narrative, but it is one that, I'll be honest, I kind of buy into, the whole like Odegaard and or Jorginho being Arteta's coach on the pitch. And I feel like without Odegaard, like it was Jorginho instigating the press on Sunday and
Yeah.
instructing people where to go. Like I do wonder, without Odegaard, if he does just want to play Jorginho as well. So yeah, not sure. Like I wouldn't be surprised if it's Rice, Jorginho, and Partey misses out. But then
Yeah.
I'm just like, oh, he seems to love Partey in midfield, don't he? But yeah, I take your point on Timber as well. It's obviously him returning from his injuries, probably played more minutes than they wanted him to so far this season, with Calafiori coming in. No, Calafiori came in the summer, didn't he? But he just hasn't really started. Zinchenko's not been there. Tomiyasu's been unavailable so far. So yeah, I think there'll be a change in each line. I think there'll be a change in defense, a change in midfield, and a change in the forward line. Personnel-wise, I'm just not sure which ones they are yet. Do you have any strong opinions on right now what you think they'd be? Like if you had to nail your colours to the mast on what you think the starting 11 will be. And obviously with that, it's important to bear in mind, like there's one thing starting the game, but then it's thinking who will be the appropriate people to come on and finish the game, like Jesus and Sterling did against Tottenham, and maximize freshness ahead of Sunday, where City obviously have an extra day rest. But yeah, do you have any confidence right now on sticking some colours to the mast on a predicted 11?
Not massively. Even the Timber thing, I'm like, well, could he start and then look to take him off early with Calafiori having just missed out? I think if I were to sort of, like you say, sort of nail colours to the mast, I think it might be that Rice comes in midfield, probably for Partey, and I think we'll see Gabriel Jesus.
Okay. Who do you
I
reckon that
think
would be in place of?
it wouldn't actually shock me if it was in place of Saka.
Okay. Yeah, so it's worth saying
Um,
Saka obviously had cramps towards the end of the game as well,
yeah.
didn't he?
Like I would expect it more likely to be for either Martinelli or Trossard, and the other one plays on the left. But it wouldn't shock me if he's tried to start Jesus ahead of Saka for this game, just with half an eye on City at the weekend.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. And then, so you think it would be Raya? Sorry, yeah. Would you mind saying you're kind of back to
Yeah.
front
Sorry.
11?
So
What you reckon it would be?
Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel. Now I've said it. I'm gonna stick with Timber starting, but I think he could be one to keep an eye on for an early sub. Rice and Jorginho, Jesus, Havertz. No, I'm missing one there. No, I
No,
think
yeah,
Rice
you'll
will
go.
go back to a midfield 3. So Partey, Jorginho, and Rice, and then
Fair play.
Jesus, Havertz, and I think Trossard.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, Martinelli to start on the bench and hopefully come on in a
Yeah.
certain game state. All right, in midfield three of Rice, Jorginho, Partey. Have we seen that yet?
I don't think so. I know we've seen sort of like, Odegaard with two of them, but I don't think we've seen all three.
Sure, interesting. Yeah, it'll
Which
be interesting to see
it
when we.
might not work, but like just sort of thinking about it and thinking he might actually look to do that. But
Yeah, fair play. No, it'll be interesting when you talk to us a little bit about Atalanta to see if that's something that influences your thoughts. Because from
yeah,
my very brief research, it looks to me they kind of play like a 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, and yeah, like wing backs, bloody Kolasinac in there. That's a throwback. But I reckon Arsenal will approach the game similarly to Sunday and kind of let Atalanta have majority of the ball, and hopefully it plays into our favor where we're just defensively robust and then really direct when we go forward. And as a result, like there's two, when I said I think there'll be a change in each line in
yeah,
defense, the things I'm weighing up in my head are Ben White, in my opinion, looks really uh tired. Can I say that? Like, and he's played a lot of football
yeah,
in the last 2-3 years, and I think a lot of that is he's not had any reliable cover. Like Tomiyasu's been out multiple times. We haven't really had anyone else that can cover there. And I think with Calafiori back, there is the possibility Ben White gets a breather. I must say a breather, not dropped in a
yeah.
game soon, where Timber goes right back, Calafiori left
Timber
back.
goes to that. Yeah,
The other dilemma in my head is City's 1v1 dribblers, like Doku and Grealish, less so nowadays, but Savio as well. What type of fullbacks will he want to play on Sunday? And then also the forward line. I just think Martinelli, I think, will start against City. Just his off. I know there's a lot of debate about him kind of on the ball and his decision making at the minute, but I think his off the ball work is something that's so underrated, and I reckon he'll want to keep him fresh for Sunday. So has he got it in him to put in another shift like that on Thursday against Atalanta? Havertz, I think he's someone that he's probably one of the most durable players in the squad. So I just think he'll start tomorrow. He'll start on Sunday. He'll get rested against Bolton. So Jesus is an interesting one. I can definitely see him starting. I'm just confused as to who in place of. If I had to nail my colours to the mast for this game, I think Calafiori was going to start the North London derby, and that was a late call that they made that he was ruled out. Because I don't know if you saw the quotes about Arteta where he said, like, we had a plan, then we lost one player, we
yeah,
had to make another change, then we lost another. I think the way I read that was we had a plan, then we lost Odegaard because Rice was confirmed before the international
yeah,
break, and then we lost Calafiori as well. So I think Calafiori is going to start this game, and Timber's going to get a breather. I think he'll want Timber ready for Sunday against Man City. So I'm going to go Raya, White, Saliba, Gabriel, Calafiori. I think it will be another midfield two of Declan Rice and Jorginho. I think Partey will get a breather in this game. And I'm going to copy you. I'm going to go in the sense that I think Saka will start from the bench in this game because of his off-the-ball shift he's had to put in. I think it'll be Jesus on the right with, ironically, Martinelli on the left, and then Trossard, Havertz up top again. And I think he'll look to manage that forward group through substitutions and maybe like Martinelli 60, Sterling 30, Jesus 60, Saka 30. So then everyone arrives in a really healthy place, hopefully, for Sunday. So that's what I'm going with. Atalanta, tell me about them. So they've had a mixed start to the season. So they obviously lost the Super Cup against Real Madrid in the summer, but they've played 4-1-2, lost 2. They lost 4-0 to Inter, but they beat, was it Lecce they beat 4-0?
yeah,
Yeah, it was. But I looked at, like, I'm a nerd for data, so I looked at all the expected data, and it was like very even games. And I know that's dangerous to do looking at just XG in one game, but yeah, can you tell us a little bit about their season so far, how they've been playing. And for podcast listeners, I've got their lineup on the screen that played and beat Fiorentina 3-2. I'm not going to read it out because there are some players in there I'm sure I will absolutely butcher pronunciation-wise, but there's a lot of familiar players in there, like Kolasinac, Edison, highly rated around Europe as a centre mid, De Roon in there, the Belgium dude, number 17, that I can't pronounce, De Ketelaere. And then, of course, Adamola Lookman's in there. Skamaka's injured, so they've got Retugi, who's deputising in his absence. But yeah, can you tell us a little bit about Atalanta and how they've been getting on so far this season and what we might expect from them tomorrow?
Yeah, so it's been a little bit of a strange season for them to start with. I think, there's been a lot more eyes on them as well, with just sort of having won the Europa League, played the Super Cup, but there was a little bit of sort of a couple of issues to start the season. Skamaka, not long before the season, got a long-term injury. I think he tore his ACL. And they went and got Retegui, which, funnily enough, those are, I think, were two of the three strikers in the Italy squad for the Euros. So they just went and got sort of another one. And he's slotted in very well. But they had the whole, funnily enough, mentioning sort of Arsenal with Adamola Lookman's transfer drama, where they then left him out for a couple of games because he sort of wanted to leave. And I think that was a key part of their team that they were then sort of working out how to go without.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
Yeah. So I think it was Arsenal and PSG were the other ones that were interested. And so I think he sort of was like, actually, I want to go. And they were like, well, while this is going on, we're not going to pick you then. So that probably, you have to caveat sort of their start to the season with, I think Lookman started for the first time this season in the Fiorentina game. They've had to navigate a couple of things. They had a couple of centre backs out. So like De Roon, first 3 games of the season was playing in the back 3. But I think in general, sort of when we were looking at them before the season, the goalkeeper was a little bit of a question between Carnesecchi and Musso. But then Atletico Madrid decided to do everyone a favour by buying Musso, which made it really clear. For those who haven't
replaced Oblak then, or is he just
no,
like a
he's
squad
gone to be backup. He's gone to be the second choice. But for those who haven't seen the full squad, they did sign as their backup Atalanta Rui Patricio.
No way.
So he was sort of sitting out there as a free agent, and they went and got him. Jim City at centre back is the only, I think, centre back that has started every game. And he's sort of the main man for them, really, in terms of he plays on the right side of it, but he's the ever reliable one who will play sort of basically every game for them. Heen at centre back has played 3 of the 4, so he's another one. It was actually, funnily enough, I think Kolasinac was expected to start as the left centre back, but the weekend again was the first start for him as well. So that's fun. That's a nice one to sort of bring back for everyone.
I mean, if Saka does start and he's up against, I don't know, will he be up against Kolasinac? Do they play with does Kolasinac push out wide when they defend? How do they kind of approach it systematically with it on paper being a back 3 with wing backs?
Yeah, so those wing backs do push up. So I think Saka will obviously have to help back at times, assuming it is him. We've talked about that, but it will probably be Ruggieri on that side who does look to push forward, same as Bellanova or Zappacosta on the other side. And they will look to push forward. So you are asking those, one of the midfielders probably tends to help out a little bit more. So I think it's often been De Roon. And so I think, you will look to get high. So yeah, the person on the right-hand side could be looking to go up against Kolasinac.
I'm loving this. This is such an education for me because I don't really get to watch much European football anymore, but yeah, I'm loving it. What would you say are their kind of main threats and areas we have to kind of be, really switched on and alert to?
So I think it is those wide areas, particularly because they play with the 2 sort of attacking players in support of a striker. It can often end up as a line of 4, and Edison or sort of they've used Pasalic in there as another one, can end up supporting, but it means that you do have to cover right across the pitch, which I think Arsenal in general, in terms of letting teams have it in wide areas and cross in, which is probably what Atalanta want to do at times. Particularly if they get the opportunity to sort of get forward, get the cross into Retegui, who's one of these with a good aerial presence. That's something that actually probably suits Arsenal to a degree, I would say. I think Saliba and Gabriel, at least in the air, would probably back themselves in that situation. I think in some ways it's actually not the worst opponent for Arsenal. There is that organized chaos element, like you say. It's quite funny.
Can you
because
tell
the
us a
other
bit
person
about that? Because in the blogs I was reading, I saw it in air quotes, but I think there's one thing reading an article. I'd love to hear someone tell me a little bit more about that. Like, what do people mean by that?
Yeah, it's quite funny because it's always with Bielsa people, because the only other person I've heard that used with regards to is Andoni Iraola, who obviously came to manage Bournemouth, but when he was the manager at Rayo Vallecano, the organized chaos, quote unquote, was the thing that was used to describe his teams. And I think there are similar elements. They don't necessarily press high. I think if you look at sort of, you can get into all sorts of numbers, but things like I think it's regaining possession in the final third. They're not particularly high up, but they do sort of do things at high pace, particularly when they look to sort of combat teams or tackle teams or challenge them. They will sort of do it quite aggressively. They are, I think, so far, obviously it's small sample size, but I think one thing that helps illustrate it is I think they're top in La Liga, Serie A for XG, but third worst in Serie A for XG conceded.
Jesus Christ. Chaos.
Yeah. So I think it is that representation of it ends up in there will be chances at both ends. You can almost sort of guarantee. So I think the bizarrely, the game they had with the lowest sort of combined XG was the Inter game that ended up 4-0. And both teams had over 1 XG in that game still. So it shows that even in sort of games, even where they don't score or anything, there will still be chances.
This is so interesting because, you're definitely helping me paint a picture in the way I see the game starting to go. And I think it leads us nicely into score predictions, which will obviously be fed by how you think the game will go. And it's interesting there what you say about them perhaps being an opponent that suits Arsenal, like the crossing into the box, Arsenal backing themselves to defend that. The one thing I think the Champions League, in the way it kind of educated me yet humbled me last season, was I went in as an Arsenal fan thinking we can absolutely get to the final last year. And I think it's because in a 38 game week period in the Premier League, I see Arsenal control a lot of the different situations in a game. In the Champions League, I can't explain why. I just feel like the element of control goes out of the window a little bit, and teams, I don't know if they take more risks, or I don't know if they're more direct, they're more brave, but it does feel a little bit more basketball and chaotic and stuff. And it will be interesting to see if Atalanta are able to break through Arsenal's defensive control, which we'll be used to. Like, how do you actually see the game going tomorrow before we get into your score prediction?
Yeah, so I think even if you think back to things like the Europa League final, it was a lot of joy on the counter-attack and things like that for them, exploiting space when it's available to them, which is another thing that sort of makes me think Arsenal might not be a great opponent for them. Like, obviously, they carry threat, but in terms of Arsenal in general, aren't going to allow you a lot of space to exploit. So I think they can have some joy just because they've got those players as well. Particularly the attacking players, the likes of Lookman, De Ketelaere, Retegui. Like it's the sort of players who can make something happen. The more I've thought about it, the more I thought it's a dangerous matchup, particularly away, but it's something that in a number of ways does sort of suit Arsenal. So I'd be quite disappointed if we don't win the game.
What are some of the other ways you think it suits Arsenal other than the kind of crosses and stuff like that?
I think it's just that thing. They thrive, as we've sort of said, they thrive in chaos. I think Arsenal in general we can sort of thrive when it does get chaotic, but I think Arsenal excel in not letting games get chaotic. And so I think if they limit how chaotic the game is, I have questions about Atalanta if they can't sort of get out and run and sort of exploit that. So I think that's just with that, and then the fact that they do want to at times find Retegui with crosses, and particularly if he's up against Gabriel, then you're sort of like, well, you back him to win most of those and everything. So I think it's just those sort of elements of where you sort of see Atalanta thrive. It's like they might get Arsenal at some point, but it's actually things that I think are what we would sort of expect Arsenal to be able to sort of cancel out quite effectively.
I'll tell you what, when we drew them, my initial instinct was I thought people were completely being arrogant and not taking them seriously. You've definitely put my mind at ease now with because I still think there's the element of you can't take them for granted. But in terms of, as you've kind of explained to me how they play and the way things may go, you've definitely put my mind at ease, because I was looking at this and we still could drop points, of course, but I feel more confident now that I've had this chat with you. So thank you very much. Score prediction. What would you go with then? You sound like you're fairly confident in an Arsenal win. Would you put a score to it?
Yeah, so I think it's one of these ones where the scoreline doesn't sound comfortable, but I think it's a comfortable version of it. I'm going 2-1 to Arsenal at this point. It's about as comfortable a version of a 2-1 as I think you end up seeing, but I'm just sort of thinking I think Arsenal will win the game, but I'm sort of looking at it, it's like, yeah, but I could see Atalanta scoring at some point. We've seen what the likes of Lookman and De Ketelaere at moments are capable of, Ederson in midfield as well. And it's just like all it takes is for one of them to have a moment. But I would expect Arsenal to win the game. Either I was sort of varying more between 2-1 and 3-1 rather than sort of being concerned about it as such.
You've taken the words out of my mouth. I've got the same score, 2-1, but with it very closely potentially being a 3-1. I think everything you've said in terms of it suiting us in the way they'll look to play, I think it similar to Spurs, it just let them have the ball in periods and kind of hit them on the counter and make them punish them when they kind of are structurally lacking, I guess. And what you said as well in terms of them, was it third highest for expected goals, but 17th for expected against? It's
top for expected goals, 18th for expected goals conceded. So it really is sort of poles apart.
And that's what I'd be surprised if we kept a clean sheet. They sound like a very impressive offensive unit, and while we're a very impressive defensive unit, I think in their own stadium, with the way they play, with the high energy, we do very well to completely shut them out, I think, with all of that information. But I think there'll be periods where we are kind of surprised with how much space Arsenal have when they regain the ball. That is the vibe I'm getting. And I think we're very smart at, when we do regain the ball, the territories we then attack and how we do it with numbers and the spacing between our offensive units. So I'm encouraged by this conversation. I'm very glad I got you on, because I was very nervous before this. I'll be honest. From my research, and this is why it's always nice to chat to someone in person rather than just reading articles. So yeah, I'm going 2-1 to the Arsenal, but I think there's a chance it could be a 3-1, and I hope it is, like you say, that comfortable win where we kind of like Liverpool. I look at Liverpool last night, and I think that is the perfect European night where they rotated 2 or 3 of their starting 11. They went 3-1 up, I think, in the 66th minute, and then they were able to kind of take a few players off and arrive at the weekend with a squad in decent freshness levels. So fingers crossed we're both correct. Tommy Gunn was in the chat. Thanks for joining, mate. He's gone with 2-0 to the Arsenal. So yeah, let's hope he's right. But mate, honestly, thanks so much for this. This has been absolutely brilliant and an education for me. And I know I said it jokingly earlier, but I wasn't joking. You're coming back on for Girona and possibly all of the other European games, because this is a big
I quite enjoy talking about Girona, so I'm happy to come back at any point, obviously.
Very nice. All right. Thanks a lot. And I know it's not just European football that you cover. Do you want to let people know where? Well, I don't know. What do you think about Twitter? Are you happy for people to go and follow you there? But just tell us a little bit about some of the other formats that you're involved with.
Yeah, I mean they're happy. They're perfectly sort of, I'm happy for them to follow me there. I'm not sure how useful my Twitter is unless you're looking for things like championship injury news, which obviously we sort of talked about. Various, or I've talked about various points. I do a podcast on the Gaffer fantasy game, both the championship format and the Super League format, which for those who don't know and are worried about there being a Super League, is just the top 4 teams from each of the big 5 leagues in Europe in one fantasy game. So do podcasts on both of those. I do the injury news for the championship each week. My tweets, apart from that, are very random. They can be about anything at any moment. So I am at Angus81 on there. If you want to sort of come and interact with me, I'm always happy to.
Lovely stuff. Go drop the man a follow, and yeah, I'm sure you'll be educated like I've been, not just on Atalanta, but many other clubs across La Liga, Serie A, the Championship, and many more. So yeah, thanks a lot for this, mate. Really enjoyed it. Let's go and get our first 3 points on the league board, not the group stage, which is taking some adjusting to. Just a quick one on that. Do you have any thoughts on the new format?
I'm encouraged. I was less sort of fussed about changing the old format. I thought the old format in general was fine. I didn't think it necessarily needed changing. I'm willing to sort of be open to this. I've been encouraged so far, but I'm sort of taking a wait and see approach to see whether, because it's still a little bit sort of getting used to it, is certainly different.
Fair play. I am someone who is very impulsive and have the inability to manage my rational and irrational thoughts. I jump straight to a conclusion. I absolutely love it. I found I'm the same as you, I'll be honest, in the sense that I didn't think the old format needed a change, but when I then saw the proposed change, I was like, oh, I quite like that, because I personally found the Champions League irrelevant until the quarterfinals. And I think with this, each match day, in my opinion, has like a really tasty tie. I think in the previous format, the groups were kind of done fairly well, round 4 out of 6 sometimes. I think with this one, with the top 8 having the motivation to get the most points and go through automatically, I think that will give an incentive right until the last match day.
Yeah.
Player welfare is another conversation, but yeah, I'm kind of ignoring that for now. But no, thanks a lot for this, mate. Absolutely loved it. And fingers crossed we're all correct on our score predictions. Go follow Angus on Twitter, like he said. Check out some of the fantasy games if you want to. And I'll be back to review the game on... No, I won't. We're doing our Man City preview pod on Friday, and Nima and I will touch on the Atalanta game at the start of that. Thanks again, everyone. Catch you Friday. Let's go get our first 3 points in Europe. Up the Arsenal. Cheers, Angus.